Great interview for you guys tonight on TYT Interviews, or today I should say. We've got Mike Papantonio. He is America's lawyer, title that I love. So, Pap, it's great to have you on. Also host of Ring of Fire, of course. And Pap's got a new book out, Law and Disorder. It's a good starting point, Pap, because last night at the debates, Donald Trump talked about how he's the law and order guy. We have to have law and order. We've got to have a country, he says. Yeah. We don't have a country. So do you believe him when he says he's the law and order candidate?
Well, he has the potential to sell that because everybody wants to hear it right now. I don't know. I'm sure you read Rick Perlstein's Nixon Land that came out several years ago, Cenk. In Nixon Land, what Perlstein said was that the road to Nixon's White House was the discussion about law and disorder. And his point was that he set out to scare everybody. He was going to scare everybody. Back then it wasn't immigration. Back then it was, if you recall, the Nixon years, it was the anarchy's taken over the country. People are protesting about the war. Drugs have gone crazy. It was a different kind of pitch. But if you take that as a template to what Trump is doing, it's very close to that. His issue comes down to a fear over the fact that we have immigrant gangs coming into the United States that are going to rape and pillage, fear over loss of jobs. He has these very same talking points. And sometimes it's easy to believe that Trump is up there completely without a compass, completely without a plan. But I can promise you, when you take what was done in the Nixon years, and when you analyze what Perlstein had to say about Nixon Land and how Nixon came into power, this is a repeat of that. The narrative is slightly different. It has to do with we got to be afraid of terrorists. I'm the guy to fix that. We have to be afraid of gang killings. Look at Chicago, 500 people killed. We have to be afraid of police officers being killed. And the people who have brought us all that is the last 20 years of Democrats. That is exactly the delivery that we saw with Nixon's rise to power. So every time you think that Trump doesn't have somebody advising him on those kinds of narratives, if you listen closely, you kind of conclude that there's more to it.
Well, actually, the guy that's advising him on that is literally the same exact guy who was advising Nixon. There's your connection. It's Roger Ailes.
Yeah, exactly.
Roger Ailes prepped Donald Trump for this debate. Roger Ailes was communications for Richard Nixon. And it's the same playbook, no matter what the facts are, Pap. So back then, we did have significant crime. Now, 2015, there was a slight uptick in crime from 2014, making it only the third safest year in the last 20 years. And only because 2014 was so damn safe that 2015 came in third, and 2013, et cetera, also safe. We've actually lowered crime tremendously. Now, ISIS is a significant problem, but Trump says it's the most evil thing we have ever seen. I'm pretty sure the Nazis were slightly more evil. But the playbook is not tethered to the facts, and the playbook is scared the living hell out of everybody and tell them you alone can protect them. Haven't we seen that throughout history, Pat?
Well, we've seen it during times in American history where there have been other issues that people have been concerned about. If you take that issue, these issues that we're talking about, and you add it to something that is more salient, something that maybe the American middle class is reacting to, if you notice the way he mixes up these discussions with things like NAFTA. And oh, by the way, yes, crime is bad. Your jobs are being taken from people from somewhere else. And Bill Clinton sent your jobs out of the country with NAFTA. And Hillary, she wants to do the same thing with TPP. So it's not the trick. I think what it is, there's an issue where it comes to trying a case, and you know this issue, and that is never go in and try to sell one solid issue. You sell the ancillary issues that merge with that very well. And I think, look, as goofy as Trump looked last night, there were times you're thinking, my God, how could this be any worse? As goofy as that was, in there was that pattern. If you listen carefully, there was that pattern. I woke up this morning and I saw a Huffington Post declaring a victory oh, this was awful. Trump is history. Hillary has won. That is wrong thinking. When in a few days, when we stand back and we see what the impact of this really was, I think we're going to be very surprised. We kind of look at this and we say, well, which person would do better in front of the UN, for example? Well, obviously, Hillary's going to do better in front of the UN. She's going to be an impressive person in front of the UN. Trump's going to be a clown. But the truth is, Trump's followers, his base, would rather not have a UN at all. So it doesn't make any difference as you analyze all this. And so last night was very tough to follow. I think the pundits did a reasonably poor job. I thought there were a couple of pundits I thought did a good job in saying, you know what? You got to call a winner here. If I'm calling a winner, I'm calling Trump. I'm calling a winner on Hillary. Does this make any difference in the polls? Probably not. If it is, it's soft at best. And I think that's what I came away with, because this fear card, as we're talking about, law and order, it's still selling.
So, Pat, you won just about every award there is to win in the legal field. Your nickname's America's Lawyer. So I'm going to ask you to take on that role, but in the political sphere. And let's play a fun hypothetical game. So, and the first task is fairly hard. If you were advising Donald Trump, if he was your client, now he's got all those skeletons in his closet. He did the Bertha thing. He won't release his tax returns. You got a tough client here. How would you advise him to perform in a debate like this? What would you tell him to do and not do?
Well, I think you have to with Trump. You can't over-intellectualize, because most of his followers are anti-intellectual. And so when Trump tries to really argue basics, when he moves away from his demagogue role, anytime he does that, he's hurting himself. Interesting thing, and the reason I say that, Jank, is if you'll take a look at his pattern. Let's take the debate and make it a broader sense. My advice would be, do in the debate what you're doing day to day out on the stump, because it seems to be working, and that is this. Move from outrageous statement to outrageous statement. Because if you look at what he's doing day to day, he makes an outrageous statement on Monday. The corporate media comes in like little lemmings to try to do their awful analysis of what just happened, but by Tuesday he's moved on to another awful statement, and it's almost like a cage match of wrestlers. You can't thread a needle with anything Trump is trying to do. So whoever is advising him that, whether it's just his natural persona, which I'm sure it is, but who's advising him is saying, do not try to over-intellectualize with Hillary Clinton. That, unfortunately, as sad as that is, that would be the advice I would give him, because he doesn't have the ability to do it. He doesn't know the issues as well. We saw it last night when he had wonderful opportunities to take that he did not take, because he simply wasn't armed with the ability to do that. He had the ability to talk about Hillary's Wall Street background, but he wasn't really armed to do that. So you almost have to take this demagogue character and you have to say, keep moving, move to A, move to B, move to C, keep them guessing, and that's the best you can do with a candidate like that. It's like having a witness on the stand that you know you're never going to really get to be able to be the most capable witness. That's the type of advice you would give them.
That's really interesting. It's almost taking the fifth, but only on his defense. So don't bother trying to defend yourself, because you're not going to be able to do it. You don't have the intellectual capacity, and plus you're wrong. So just stay on the offense.
Exactly. Exactly. And you've seen it as a lawyer, Jank, so have I. I have to, unfortunately, use it sometime in court. I'll have a witness that burns down on cross-examination and on redirect. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reinvent the demagogue issues that he raised on direct. And so it's called a rebuild, it's called rehabilitation, and it's a technique that is used in a courtroom, and certainly it's a technique that could play itself out with Donald Trump if he does it right.
Okay, now let's turn to Hillary Clinton. If you're her lawyer and you're giving her advice on how to prosecute the case against Donald Trump, defend herself, however you think is the right way to play it, what would you tell her?
Well, first of all, I would tell her that she has to move away from this idea, this single issue. Trump is a horrible person. We get it, Hillary. Trump is a horrible person. You're seeing this even with social media. Social media thinks they can sell this election because Trump is a horrible person. Yes, he is a horrible person. But it's time for Hillary now to pivot and move beyond that and say, yeah, he's a horrible person, but I want to tell you what I can do. What I can do that he can't do. If you really think about what was delivered last night, there was not a lot of that. There was not this reason that she gave to voters, to progressives, for example. Best example I can give you is progressives, Cenk. Like it or not, it is the elephant in the room. Progressives still are not sold on Hillary Clinton. Millennials still are not sold on Hillary Clinton. So what you do with that is you make a quick hit. Yes, Trump's a horrible person, but then you move back to substance. But let me tell you what I'm going to do. Let me tell you why I'm not horrible, because I'm going to improve the lives of millennials. Millennials are going to be able to get jobs. Middle class is going to rise again because of these particular plans. She hasn't really done that. And Trump is a horrible person only takes you so far in the polls. You got to get progressives to turn out, but you got to give them another reason besides Trump is a horrible person. You turn out, and I'm going to do something for you. That's what makes people turn out. That's what you do in a closing argument. That's how you distinguish your case from the other case. This is what they're telling you. They did some horrible things. I showed you the horrible things they did. But let me tell you what it means in your life. It's called the reptilian mind. That's what it's called. The reptilian mind is always looking for that thing that's going to make their life better. And you can't just say again and again, Trump's a horrible person.
You know, that is really interesting because when Hillary Clinton goes to talk about her positions, as she did at the very beginning of the debate, it sounds so rote. It sounds like she's reading talking points, which she has practiced over and over, which is probably because that's exactly what happened, right? She practiced those talking points, but it doesn't come with any passion or feeling. And she's a Clinton, so she can't help but think, well, it's a general election, I shouldn't be progressive. No, you should be progressive.
Yes.
If you went out there and said, hey, remember I adopted Bernie Sanders' education plan, so your kids are going to have a fair chance.
Yes.
Any of your kids can go to college for free. Now, isn't that wonderful that they get a chance to be as rich as Donald Trump? That's an affirmative case for your position.
Exactly.
You know, and so I totally agree with you on that. Let's try this one more time now with Lester Holt, the moderator. You know, next time it's going to be different moderators, of course. If you're going after Trump or Clinton, you know, you can take any perspective you like on this, Pat, in terms of what you would like to pry out of them or what you think the American people will learn most from if you were a moderator. What questions would you ask them? I
think I would have asked questions that really... You know, you would think in a debate the moderator wants to keep an even keel. The moderator wants to simply put the question out there and move on to the next concept. But with these two candidates, with this particular setting, that really wasn't possible. So I guess if you're going to take, if you're in that setting, I really expected him to be more aggressive, to say what the American people are thinking. Look, they're looking at him just like they're looking at these two people on stage. He had the ability to ask the tough questions, to really put them to really go and pinpoint the things. For example, what is it that bothers the American people about Hillary Clinton? Well, what bothers them is it's another run of Bill Clinton. It's 30 years, she's been around too long. She's been running for president since she was 12 years old. Her ties to Wall Street, what has she done how is she on her war hawk issues? I don't know why moderators are afraid to do that. With Trump, I can't even, you and I could sit here for an hour and talk about what he could have done, but you have to be more aggressive. You've heard the term, I know that you've heard this as an attorney, and that is that you always say what a jury is thinking if you have a problem. If you have a terrible client, you say, there's some terrible things about this client, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to hear. The jury's thinking it, right? They know it. It's already in their head. Well, the American public, all of these things are in their head. Why are we not just putting it out there in an attack mode? Last night was the perfect opportunity to do that. He simply didn't have that. He was the closest to doing things like fact checks, but where it comes to the attack mode, go ahead and say what the American public is thinking. both as to Hillary and as to Trump. What is this political correctness that a moderator feels like they have to be locked into? We wouldn't do that in a courtroom, and I don't believe you would do it in a setting like this.
Now, of course, we both know the answer as to why they do it that way, which is that if they were more aggressive, then they wouldn't moderate the next debate.
Right.
They would be eliminated from contention from both the Republican and Democratic parties who actually run the debates. But it would be lovely if we had a real cross-examination of both of these candidates during a debate. Maybe one day somebody will sneak in there and go, I only got one shot at this. I'm going to go for it. So
yeah, it may end my career, but it'll be the thing they talk about for the next decade.
That's right.
I think it would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you mentioned wrestling earlier. God, that'd be great. Could you imagine? You got a standard mainstream reporter, and out comes Mike Papantonio, taps him on the shoulder, and goes, "All right." And he steps out, and you step in, and both the candidates are like, "Oh no."
How much fun would that be, huh?
That would be amazing. One day we dare to dream. All right, that's the debates. Pap, I did want to talk to you about a serious issue of police abuse and shootings as well. Again, we're talking to Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire and the author of Law and Disorder. And so we've got a little bit of disorder in the country. The right wing would claim it comes from protesters in Charlotte, and certainly there's been some of that. And I think that a lot of others would claim the disorder actually comes from the police themselves. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the shooting just last week in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of Terrence Crutcher, which was actually one of the most egregious police shootings I've ever seen. Out of all the ones that we've covered, that goes right up there with Tamir Rice as to, my God, why are you shooting this man? And then Charlotte, which is a little bit more ambiguous, but really got more protests and people in the streets in a way that's more significant. What's your take on those? Just let's start with what your take is.
Well, first of all, Jank, I remember when we had the Department of Justice. We had Eric Holder coming out and saying, we're going to do something about this. When he said that, the truth is he could do something about it. There was a lot he could do about it. It was all talk, though. It sounded like great sound bites. It's the very thing that we often hear from Obama. Great sound bites, follow up, where's the delivery, what really happened. With Holder, if you will go back and look at the sound bites that started developing around some of the shootings that he said we're going to get involved with, what he was talking about is we, as the Department of Justice, have some rights to do some things where it comes to police powers. It's, the constitutional, it's health, safety, and police powers. Those are the strongest things government can get involved with. Police powers are extremely strong. The Department of Justice has a right to do a lot of things. For example, Robert F. Kennedy, during the civil rights era, was able to do some remarkable things down in Alabama and Mississippi. Eric Holder has the right to do something with something, he had the right to do something with something as basic as funding for these local police entities that get a fair amount of federal funding, fair amount of federal help in a lot of different ways. Then comes Loretta Lynch. And Loretta Lynch sounds like a parrot. She parrots exactly what was said earlier with Holder, but nothing happens. Why does anything? The reason nothing happens is because it is politically painful. It's politically painful, especially in an election year, to really do anything, to really say, I'm going to take action. The Department of Justice has a dozen things they could do tomorrow, where it comes to training requirements, where it comes to equipment requirements, where it comes to a whole host of things that they can do anywhere in the United States where they see a problem, where there's federal funding involved at all. But you know what? The truth is, where it came to Obama's position on this, Obama was always so afraid that he was going to look like the African American who's overreacting on behalf of African Americans to the detriment of white folks. And that is part of what drove Eric Holder. It had to be. Because if you'll go back and look at his history, all of these statements, it was so encouraging. You felt so empowered when he said, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do it tomorrow. Nothing happened with him. Nothing happened with Loretta Lynch. And this is where we're left. And you and I will be having the same discussion 8 months from now when another 10 people are killed and the Department of Justice still does nothing.
So if you were the head of the Justice Department, Pap, another dream, what would you do? What are the actions that you would take that you think could make an actual difference in how the police act in this country?
Well, first of all, you begin with a first step, and that is to talk about funding. And when you have, there are hot spots. There's great articles that have written about police brutality hot spots. You can map them out. You can say, look, Birmingham, Alabama, for example, used to be a police brutality hot spot. It's not anymore. Now we go to North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. Maybe that's a hot spot. I haven't seen it on the map. But if it is, you go there and you say, here's what I'm going to do to you. It's not a kind and gentle discussion. Here's what I'm going to do to you. You've got to get their attention, and then there has to be some kind of organization, some kind of ombudsman organization put together by the Department of Justice that this is all they do. They go around and they evaluate what is the training of this kid that you hired right out of high school because he was a running back for your dumpy football team, because he weighs 250 pounds, has an IQ of room temperature, and he's 6 foot tall. Why do you hire that guy? He has no education. You've given him no training. You compare that guy's training to what they do in the UK to train an officer. An officer in the UK doesn't even pick up a gun for 4 years until he's worked with an apprentice. They don't even drive a car fast over there until he's had specific kind of driving. Here, Bubba knows another Bubba. So Bubba's now on the police force. They give him a gun. They give him a badge. He's got the intellect and the rational capabilities of an 8th grader. And we've put him out there with a gun in a car. The Department of Justice could do something about that immediately by saying, you know what? Those kind of standards don't work. We're going to have to rewrite standards everywhere. And if you don't want to participate, that's okay. But don't expect any money or any help from the federal government.
I like this dream that we've laid out, where you're the moderator of the debates and the head of the Justice Department, and you get to install the Bubba action plan.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to say those things, but right. they need to be said.
Right, and Pap lives in the South, so he knows. Okay.
Oh, yeah, raised down here.
So may we one day have a progressive president that might make those dreams come true. All right, Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire, author of Law and Disorder. Thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.